Well, good morning, prep school cadets, faculty, staff, and distinguished guests. My name is Craig Portwood. I'm the Director of Alumni and Community Engagement, and I have the distinct honor of introducing our speaker this morning. Our speaker is retired Navy Captain Charlie Plumb. He is a farm kid from Kansas. He graduated from the United States Naval Academy with an engineering degree and became a jet fighter pilot and a combat veteran with 74 successful missions over Vietnam. In addition, he helped start the Top Gun School in Miramar, California. On his 75th mission, just 5 days before he was scheduled to return home, Captain Plumb was shot down over enemy territory. He ejected from his F-4 Phantom jet, parachuted into enemy hands, was taken prisoner, tortured, and survived nearly 6 years in communist prison camps. And he has returned to share his story of winning through adversity, and he's done this to more than 5,000 audiences in this country and around the world. And his military awards include the Silver Star, Bronze Star, 2 Purple Hearts, and the POW Medal. And for us to get a real feel of how his story began, let's watch this video.
The first prison cell I was in Vietnam was 8 feet long and 8 feet wide, exactly the size of this light. I remember distinctly the dimensions of the little cell. I could pace 3 steps in one direction before I ran into a wall. Then I had the opportunity of turning around and pacing 3 steps the other way. Inside my new little home, I had nothing to do. I had no books to read, no window to look out, no TV, telephone, cell phone. Didn't have a pencil or a piece of paper for 2,103 days. 2,103 days equates to age 24 to age 30 in my life. Turn your calendar ahead to the year 2028. Consider between today and 2028, the books to read, classes you'll take, deals you'll do, pretty good chunk of a guy's life. Now, I've been a very active guy like you, on the go all the time, searching for an extra 15 minutes a week to call my mom. Suddenly, I had 24 hours a day for the next nearly 6 years. I'm describing this scenario to you somewhat dramatically because I think the most value I can be in your life is to invite you into my little prison cell. You see, there's a great deal to be learned in this little 8-foot by 8-foot box. So for the next few moments, I'd like for you to try to smell the stench of that 2-gallon bucket in the corner I call my toilet. I'd like for you to try to feel the baking heat of a tropical summer in a tin-roof prison cell, 120 degrees, not a breath of air. I'd like for you to try to taste the salt, the annoying taste of salt in the corners of your mouth from the sweat and the tears and the blood. Not that you'll ever be prisoners of war, God forbid. But if I do my job this morning, you'll see where the same challenges you face every day at school, at home, with the students, with the teachers. The same challenges you and I face on a daily basis are the very same challenges that I faced in that prison cell. And if that's true, and I think I can prove it to you, then your response to those challenges that we all face, if you're going to succeed, has to be the same recipe of responses I used over there just to survive. And if this is too great a stretch for you, if you're already having trouble bridging the gap in time and geography between my life experience and yours, the best I can offer you is an interesting war story. But here's the connect. Here's the Dutch point. Here perhaps is the reason your life and mine intersected today. There's not a cadet in this auditorium who has not, in the last few weeks or months, felt overwhelmed and underappreciated. Anybody here been lonely? Anybody here felt guilty for failing in your mission, as I did? Anybody here have trouble communicating, even with those you love the most? And there's not a cadet in this auditorium who has not, in the last few weeks or months, had your very baseline value system challenged. So, once you get the hang of this, give up your comfort zone, okay? Give up your nice uniform. Give up your family, your friends. Give up all those things that you and I use to validate ourselves. Give all that up. Step into a dingy little prison cell a long way from home. When you have that feel, I have a couple of questions. I'm going to ask for your questions and answers in a minute. I'm going to drag out that whiteboard. I'm going to write your answers down on that, okay? Here's the first question. How do you survive this? What kind of stuff do you have in your gut? Where's your grit, all right? What kind of tools do you have in your psychological toolbox you'd pull out and apply to a problem like 6 years in a communist prison camp? Question number 2, leaders. And I know that some of you don't feel like you're leaders, but you are. If you influence those around you, that qualifies you as a leader. Leaders. What about the guys next door? What about those fighter pilots in that cell next to yours, guys that are clinging to life by their fingernails? They need your help. They're in a world of hurt, but they don't trust you. They think you have some kind of hidden agenda. How do you get through to them? Well, the first thing you learn in a prison cell is pain. You probably figured that out. This hurts. This hurts a whole lot. This hurts physically. This hurts emotionally. This hurts. Second thing, you might not suspect this. The second thing you learn in a prison cell is, the minutes eventually wear into hours, and the hours eventually wear into days, days into weeks, weeks into months, and you acclimate. You learn how to breathe deeply and think about things far away, sunny beaches, warm breezes, thoughts of home. You know what happens? You get used to this. You really do. In fact, you get so comfortable in your little 8-foot by 8-foot prison cell that the last place you want to go is outside the cell because it's dark and lonely out here. At least you know the devil in the light. Here's what happens. You get this restriction built up. And the restriction is not the 8 feet between the walls. The restriction is the 8 inches between your ears. You're in this mental box. And this is a mental game. Ever been in one of those mental boxes? Yep. We all get there. I'm convinced the mental boxes of our lives can be more restrictive than those walls of stone and steel that I was behind. But I don't mind telling you this. It didn't take me very many miles. At 3 steps by 3 steps, I was going nuts. I'm right on the edge. I'm thinking, Charlie, and if you get through this, you're going to have to discipline yourself. You're going to stay active mentally and physically. You're going to have to come up with something to do. I thought that's what I'll do. I'll make a little deck of cards. And I did. I constructed a little deck of playing cards about the size of postage stamps. I tore these cards from 52 little strips of toilet paper. I can tell you this with authority. Toilet paper is tough to shuffle. You don't lick your fingers very much shuffling toilet paper. Okay, before we get back into the prison scene, let me ask you for the answer to my question. Got an answer to my question? Think about it. What do you have within you that you'd pull out and apply to 6 years in a communist prison camp? What does it take? What kind of tools do you have in your psychological toolbox you would apply to a problem like this? Anybody, shout it out. Hope. That's for sure. I'm going to write them down here if I can find a pen. Takes a lot of hope. What else? Courage, for sure. I'm sorry? Perseverance, for sure. Is that what you said? All right. Faith, that's for sure. Let's talk about faith. Let's talk about faith. Faith in what? Faith in God, of course. What else? Faith in yourself. Faith in what else? The future. We got a great list going. Hope, courage, perseverance, faith in God, yourself, future. What else? Resilience, that's for sure. We got space for one more. Strength. All right, we got a great list here. Your words, not mine. I'm just the scribe. Here's how you survive in a prison camp with hope, courage, perseverance, faith in God, faith in yourself, faith in the future, resilience and strength. Let me ask you this question. Where'd you get this stuff? Where did you get your perseverance? Where did you get your resilience? Where did that come from? Did you learn these things in a book? Let me ask you another question. How do you measure this stuff? How do you measure hope? How do you measure resilience? How do you measure your perseverance? You've given me a list of qualities of survival that you can't learn in a textbook or on a computer, and you can't measure with a yardstick. And yet, we're here at GMC learning stuff, right? We look in the books, we look in our computer, and we learn to measure things. Have you thought about that? If you can't measure it, it doesn't really exist, right? And I don't mean in any way to diminish the value of your education, your technical skills. I'm just suggesting to you that your survival in life depends on the things that you can't learn in a textbook and you can't measure with a yardstick. I call these the panels in your parachute. Let me explain that. Several years after I came home from Vietnam, I was in a restaurant in Kansas City where I used to live. About 2 tables over, a guy kept looking at me, and I caught his eye, but I didn't recognize this gent. He stood up. The guy walked over to my table. He pointed at me, and he said, with a very stern look on his face, he said, "You're Captain Plumb?" I looked up, and I said, "Yes, sir. I'm Captain Plumb." "You're that guy? You're that guy. You flew jet fighters in Vietnam. You're a fighter pilot. Part of that Top Gun outfit in Miramar, California. You were flying off the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You were shot down. You parachuted in enemy hands. You spent 6 years as a prisoner of war." Somewhat dumbfounded, I looked up at this guy and I said, "How in the world did you know all that?" He finally broke into a smile and he said, "Because I packed your parachute." Tell you this, for this guy that runs around the country making speeches, suddenly I was speechless. Best I could do was stagger to my feet, reach out a very grateful hand of thanks. He came up with just the proper words. The guy grabbed my hand, he pumped my arm, and he said, "I guess it worked." I said, "Yes, sir, it sure did." And I must tell you, I've said a lot of prayers of thanks for your nimble fingers, but I had no idea I'd ever have the opportunity of expressing my gratitude in person. He said, "Were all the panels there?" I said, "I appreciate your concern. I must be honest with you. No, they weren't. Of the 18 panels I was supposed to have in that parachute, had only 15 good ones. 3 of the panels were torn. But it wasn't your fault. It was mine. I ejected from that F-4 Phantom at 600 knots close to the ground. I was well outside the envelope of that parachute. You did your job. I didn't do mine." I said, "But let me ask you a question. Do you keep track of all the parachutes you pack? Do you know of all the lives you've saved?" The guy said, "No." He said, "It's enough gratification for me." And what he said, okay, what he said was maybe the most important thing I say this morning. And I think what he said, the answer to my question of do you keep track of all the parachutes, I think deals directly with duty, honor, country. I think it deals directly with character above all. I think it deals directly with what you learn here besides reading, writing, and arithmetic. Here's what he said. He said, "No, I don't keep track of all the parachutes I pack. It's enough gratification for me just to know that I've served." Here's a sailor, okay? One of 5,000 men aboard that aircraft carrier that I was on. His job is well below the waterline, okay? He can't see out. And he stands at a long wooden table. He's a rigger, okay? A parachute rigger. Stands at a long wooden table, and he weaves the shrouds, and he folds the silk panels of these parachutes, and he passes them along one after another, just doing his job 8, 10, 12 hours a day, while the jet jockey, while the Top Gun zooms around the sky at the speed of sound. Couldn't have cared less about the guy down there in the hole. Until one day my parachute came along. Then he saved my life and packed it up for me. So if you will accept this metaphor, when you graduate from this school, you will go out into life packing parachutes, serving without asking anything in return. And you'll have a lot of people, whether you go in the military or civilian, whether you're a first responder, whatever you do, you'll be able to pack parachutes. Put these principles into the lives of the people that look to you for strength. So, how's your parachute packed? Do you have what it takes? Do you have what it takes to graduate from this school? Do you have what it takes to serve your country? Whether you're in the military or not, okay? We all have an obligation to serve this great country of ours. Now, mine was pretty well packed. My physical parachute, 15 of 18, that was enough for a safe descent. My mental parachute had the skills of my craft. Again, I don't mean to diminish. You need an education. That's a baseline, all right? So, engineer, fighter pilot, naval officer, pretty well prepared. My emotional parachute, pretty stable guy. My spiritual parachute, I knew the Lord. Got my parachute packed early in life, as you did. I grew up in a tiny town in Kansas. I know this, you got some small towns represented here, but my little town, 325 souls and a couple of Presbyterians. Love that little town. I was a rich kid, filthy rich we were. Didn't have any material wealth, didn't have any money, but I grew up rich in family unity and love. But I grew up in a three-room house, not 3 bedrooms, 3 rooms total. Through the newspaper, I was a Boy Scout, and I got my parachute packed. Don't miss the metaphor. People gave of themselves, asking nothing in return, that I might have some of the nuggets I was going to need to survive in that prison camp. And of course, they were teachers and preachers and a coach I'll never forget named Smith. If Clarence Smith were still alive, I would have called him this morning to thank that guy for packing my parachute. Thank him for giving me some of those nuggets I was going to need in that little 8-foot by 8-foot cell. Here's what happened. He was a coach. This is basketball, okay? Ragtag basketball. We lost and lost and lost. The last game of the season, he was a veteran. This guy had shrapnel in his leg from his war. The last game of the season, we lost again. Imagine one 13-year-old lad wandering off to the locker room, head hung low, and here comes the coach. He walked with a limp, but he caught up with me, and I felt his arm over my sweaty shoulder, and I looked at the coach, and I said, "I'm sorry, coach. I guess this team's just a bunch of losers." And the coach squeezed my shoulder. He sunk his fingernails into the flesh. He said something I shall never forget. He said, "Son, whether you think you're a loser or whether you think you're a winner, you're right." I didn't understand that. I asked him the next day, "God, Coach, what did that mean?" He said, "Just this." He said, "Life is a choice. I don't care where you go. I don't care what kind of a scrape you get yourself into someday, you can choose. You can choose every day a smile or a frown. You can choose every day happiness or sadness. You can choose sickness or health. You can choose life or death." He said, "There's one more choice. When the going is tough and the margins are thin and everybody's on your case and you're a lot of ideas and you want to quit, you can always choose to give away all those other choices. You can absolutely elect to step back and become the victim, or you can step forward to become the victor. It's your choice." He said, "But I don't want you coming back here in 4 or 5 years and bellyaching to me because you flunked out of high school. You couldn't stand those teachers. They were always picking on you. I don't want you coming back here in 8 or 10 years telling me that you had this job, but you couldn't stand the foreman on your job, and so you had to quit. Don't want you coming back here in 15 years telling me that you married this gal and she turned off bad and you had to divorce her, but she was the reason you failed." He said, "Because the difference in success and failure in life is not the things around you. It's the choices you make about the things around you. And you can choose to win, and you can choose to fail, and you can choose to give away the choice." With that kind of inspiration and motivation, as you might suspect, I graduated from that little grade school, top of my class of 2. And the other guy wasn't all that bright. I don't know how smart you are, but at age 17, I had never seen the ocean. I had never ridden in an airplane. I'd never been out of the 4 states of Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. What I did know was I needed an education. I needed to go to college. My parents couldn't afford to send me to a real school, and so I needed a scholarship. And I did the old shotgun approach, man. I sent my resume to everybody I could think of. I got an appointment to Annapolis. Unbelievable. I had no idea what they did at Annapolis. I would like to stand here and tell you that I had these dreams of flying airplanes and commanding squadrons and ships around the world and being an admiral, and that wasn't it. I went to Annapolis because it was a free education. Had no idea what I was getting into. So I got on that Greyhound bus in Kansas City, Kansas, and 2 days later I was pledging to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Had no idea what it was going to take to fulfill that commitment. I don't know about your first few days here, but man, I hated the military school. They cut my hair. They cut your hair here? They got me up early. They made me do calisthenics and all this stuff. Man alive. I never had a time to sleep, all right? But I learned a lot there. Naval Academy, right? Learned to tie knots in the Morse code, drive the ships around the Chesapeake Bay. Lucky for me, I got my parachute packed. I learned some of this stuff along with engineering. The parachute packers at Annapolis, of course, were chaplains and other midshipmen, and the superintendent, Admiral Charles Kirkpatrick. This guy had gold from his wrist all the way up to his shoulder. He would stand up in front of the big pep rallies before the football games. He would clench his fist. You could see the veins running his brow. He would say, "You guys can do anything you set your minds to do." You guys can do anything you set your mind. Was this hype? Was he messing with our minds? Mental manipulation? Did it work? Those 4 years, the Naval Academy took a ragtag football team and produced 2 Heisman Trophy winners in 4 years. Roger Staubach, Joe Bellino. We were the number 2 and number 1 college team in the nation for a while because he told us we could do anything we set our minds to do. With that, I graduated from Annapolis. From that school, I didn't graduate top of my class. In fact, from the Naval Academy, I graduated in the half of the class that made the top half possible. It was a dirty job, but somebody had to do it. I threw that hat in the air, pinned on those officer bars. What a proud day in my life when I married my high school sweetheart, lovely blonde girl from Kansas. Under the arch of swords, my buddies were holding up their swords as we came out of the chapel. Flight training, Pensacola, Florida. Beeville, Texas, Meridian, Mississippi, where my flight instructor was John McCain. Yep, that guy. Out to San Diego, where I flew the first adversarial flights for the Top Gun school. Exciting time, zooming around in those jets. Launched on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. You saw the picture. A floating city. 5,000 men at that time, totally men on the aircraft carrier Kitty Hawk. And look at me. 24 years old, in command of a multi-gazillion-dollar jet fighter. See this hand? I have 2 throttles in my left hand. I shove these throttles into the afterburners. I can go 1,400 miles an hour, and that's a long way from the old John Deere tractor. See this finger? Pull the trigger on my control stick and release the missiles from underneath my wings, and I can knock down enemy airplanes I can't even see. I really am the Top Gun. I am the best of the best. I am the guy that always stands tall and the one that's never afraid. Hey, I'm probably bulletproof. How about it? Ever feel bulletproof? Do you feel bulletproof, when you got that promotion, when you got those ribbons, when you feel bulletproof when you won that sports event or aced that test? It's okay to feel bulletproof for a while. It's okay to have positive attitudes, okay? When you can positively think yourself out of reality, you know that. So when you start feeling bulletproof, when you start that you're self-made, you don't need any help from anybody else, okay? Look at me. When you start feeling bulletproof, here's the advice. Check your 6 o'clock position. You got a missile back there sneaking up your tail. We were hit. A SAM, S-A-M, surface-to-air missile, exploded with some 12,000 pounds of jet fuel on that airplane and sent that bird topsy-turvy into. There's a big airplane. It would barely fit in this room. Topsy-turvy, end over end, down towards that rice paddy below. I ejected. My co-pilot ejected. Our parachutes opened, and we came floating down over enemy territory. Ever been in one of those parachutes? I don't mean the nylon ones. I'm talking about those parachutes of life. See, that's what this discussion is about, right? The little fender benders that you and I get ourselves into once in a while. I'm talking about something as insignificant as flunking a test, as major as the loss of a child. But really, isn't that where your value lies? Let's try to measure it. Okay, just for fun. Let's measure the value of you. What are you worth, anyway? What are you worth to this school? What are you worth to your family? What are you worth to this country? What are you worth to your God? You see, it can't be measured in the easy times. Anybody can show up. Notice that? Anybody can log on. Anybody can answer the phone. Your true value has to be measured when the heat's on, when things are tough. Your value shows up when you don't know the answer and you're confused. Your value shows up when you want to quit. Or let's turn the coin over. What if you had the perfect world? Okay, just for a moment. Imagine everybody said yes to all your great ideas. Would you be as good as you are today? Would you get up as early? Would you dress in your uniform as neatly? Would you be as proactive? If you had no problems at all, here's the point. Hang in there. You're not going to believe this at first. I think I can prove it to you. Here's the point. There's a great value in getting blown out of the sky once in a while. There's great value in that wake-up call. You know, the one that you and I want to roll over and ignore, go back to sleep. The wake-up call that forces us to re-examine the way we're living our lives. Because I'm convinced adversity is a horrible thing to waste. Okay, if that's true, the next question is really easy, Captain. How do you turn it around? Got all this negative stuff falling on my head. How do I refocus this something positive? I don't know. I don't know how you do it. All I can tell you is how I did it. I felt the opening shock of the parachute. As I had been trained as a fighter pilot, I immediately looked up and I counted the panels in my parachute. That technique is called assessing your support group. I looked down to the unknown, the future. They're shooting at me. The audacity of this enemy. It's not fair. They just knocked down my multi-gazillion-dollar jet fighter. Now they're shooting at the pilot. And I'll tell you this. Now you can identify with this one. When you're dodging bullets, it's tough to come up with a long-range plan. So how do you do it? I don't know how you do it. All I can tell you is how I did it. I took a deep breath, as that gunny on the rifle range taught me. Let about half of it out. Tried to calm myself before I pulled the trigger. And I bowed my head, and I said a prayer. I asked for a little extra strength that day from above. I knew there was going to be some pain in my future. I prayed that there might be some value to the pain. Then I prayed for my wife. Remember the lady I had married under the Arch of Swords? See, this was my war, not hers. I was the volunteer here. I was the combatant. And yet, at the end of the Vietnam War, she would feel more pain from that war than I did. Hit the ground, sunk about waist deep in a rice paddy, descended upon by, seemed like a gazillion. They stripped me of everything I had. They took my flight gear, my clothing, my personal possessions. They even took my name. They gave me a name from their language just to humiliate me for the next nearly 6 years. Dragged me around village to village, camp to camp. Tortured for 2 days with ropes and irons and whips. And that's when they tossed me into this little cell, my new home. 3 steps by 3 steps. We call that the Hanoi Shuffle. A few hundred miles into this experience, and I'll tell you my physical state. I was bleeding from 4 open wounds, okay? 4 holes in my body where blood's coming out. No medical care at all. I'm getting real skinny, surviving on 2 bowls of rice a day and a little broth. I'm developing these boils. We never really understood where they came from, but every fighter pilot shot down in Vietnam in the summertime got boils. big carbuncles all over our bodies. I'm rotting away in this communist prison camp. That's my physical state. And that, friends, was the good news. The bad news was my mental state. I had given up. I had surrendered. Fighter pilots are not supposed to surrender. That's not in our playbook. That's not in our DNA. We're supposed to fight on. And I had surrendered. And I felt very guilty about that. In the military, you're given the code of conduct, okay? It says if you're captured, you give name, rank, serial number, date of birth. Those 4 items are all that's required of a prisoner of war, according to the Geneva Convention. And I flew the skies of Vietnam thinking I'm tough enough. I'm the top gun. I will never give more than name, rank, serial number, date of birth. And the pain was too great. And so I gave in. How could I do that? I felt so guilty. How can I ever go back to my country, face my family, my friends, my fellow fighter pilots, and admit to them that I'd failed in my mission so miserably? So it was with that mindset, okay? I'm pacing the floor. I heard in the far corner the chirping noise of a cricket. Paid no attention at first. Yet the longer I listened, the more rhythmic this sound became. You know, it's tough to find crickets sometimes because the sound kind of goes everywhere. And so I'm looking for this cricket, all right? And I found in the corner of my prison cell, no cricket, but a little piece of wire. It was about that long. It was poked through a hole at the base of the cell wall and scratching on my concrete floor, making this chirping noise like a cricket. Are you with me? Can you imagine what might be going through your mind in a situation and with this mindset of guilt, okay, and frustration? I'm watching the little wire, bobbing in and out of there, scratching on the floor. My first thought, the enemy is not sophisticated enough to try to trick me, so it's not the enemy. It's got to be an American. If it's an American, it also has to be another fighter pilot, since that's who's in these prison camps. Boy, would I like to talk to another fighter pilot. We could tell some stories. But I bet that guy's tougher than I am. He's probably older. He's probably more mature. He's probably smarter. He's probably a better pilot. He probably didn't cry when they tortured him like I did. Well, I'm losing interest now. Ever feel that way? You know, when you got that friend you think maybe tempted with drugs or sex, or it's better just not to talk to anybody, or maybe a brother or a sister or a mom and a dad with that unspeakable challenge in your family, and you just want to ignore it. And if I can roll over here in the corner of this prison cell and wait, surely in a few years they'll break down the gates, the war will end, I'll be set free, I'll never have to take another risk the rest of my life. Well, there's an interesting word, R-I-S-K. We try to avoid risk in our lives, right? And yet I'm suggesting to you that if you're going to be all you can be, you got to take a risk. Sometimes you just have to grit your teeth. You got to reach down. You got to grab that little wire and tug. And I did. And the wire tugged back. I tugged again, and it disappeared right back through that rat hole. The wire came back about an hour later with a little note wrapped around the end of the wire. The note was written on a dirty piece of toilet paper, just ink, and this made from ashes or brick dust. And it was a code. It was a 5x5 matrix of the alphabet, okay? 5 lines, 5 rows. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. What letter did I leave out? I left out K, substituted a C just to make it come out even. Numbers down the side and across the top, indicating any letter would be represented by 2 numbers, okay? Number of the line, number of the row. Got it? A, first line, first row. 1 tug, one more tug. Z, 5th line. You think your email is cumbersome. You try this. but it worked. This silly, archaic, cumbersome code became our language. And we found it was absolutely vital, I mean life and death vital, that we communicate with this code. We use this in a lot of different ways, tugging on wires and tapping on walls so that we could talk to another prisoner of war. Oh, here's the important part. It wasn't the words. It wasn't the sentences. It wasn't the top secret escape plans we were passing around. That was not the life and death purpose of communication in the prison camp. It was the simple validation of another human being. Because in those prison cells, when it was dark, and it was in a lot of the camps, and you were alone, some guys were in solitary confinement for 4.5 years. You'd lose track. It was dark, and you were alone. You didn't know it was a real memory. What's a hallucination? You need a baseline. You need to validate your sanity. Sometimes you didn't know if you were alive or dead. The simple tugging on a wire. To have that wire tugged back meant two things. Number one, somebody's responding to something I am doing physically, thus I exist. Number two, somebody cares. What does that mean in your life? In this day and age, you and I would probably argue the greatest achievement of all time is we can now pass a packet of data from one handheld machine around the world to another handheld machine. I'm here to suggest to you that your essence in life, your reason on this globe, your raison d'etre, as the French say, is to validate other people. It's the old adage, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's packing parachutes. On the other end of the wire, Lieutenant Commander Bob Shoemaker, fighter pilot extraordinaire, astronaut candidate. He had orders to NASA when he was shot down. And he was there for over 8 years. He was there 2 years when I showed up. He'd been piecing together little bits of wire for those 2 years, poking them out in a hole in his cell wall across a store. There was a storeroom between our two prison cells. He fished that little wire over the boxes, around the shovels, and through the ropes, and finally into the little hole in my cell wall, 14 feet away. Unreal. Just to contact another American. Just to pack my parachute. His first words, how you doing, buddy? My first words, I'm doing terrible, buddy. He said, my president sent me over here. It's his dirty Vietnam War. It's all political. We know that. But it's not fair what's going on in my life. But it's not my fault. I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control. And the enemy is not playing fair. They're torturing prisoners. They signed the Geneva Convention. They're not abiding by it. It's not fair what's going on in my life, but it's not my fault. I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my control. And it was not my private airplane I flew in here, you know. That was a U.S. government airplane. Congress bought it. I didn't. They should be here. I should not. The whole thing is not fair what's going on in my life. Ever feel that way? Pretty easy to feel that way as a cadet, right? Woe is me. It's not fair what's going on in my life. Man, they get me up so early and go through these courses. I can't believe this chemistry that the tests that they're giving me, and this, and just about the time I make it over the bar, they keep raising the bar, and it's not fair what's going on in my life, but it's not my fault. I'm the victim of circumstances beyond my. Shoemaker said, you want to know your biggest problem? I said, you mean I have problems bigger than the ones I can see? He said, sounds like you're suffering from a fairly common prison disease. Most fighter pilots get this disease when they get shot down. Some guys die from it if they don't get it cured. Oh, man. What's the name of this disease, I said. He said, well, around here we just call it prison thinking. I said, prison thinking? He said, Roger, you think you're a prisoner. I dropped the wire. I stepped back from the corner of that prison cell, and I did another little self-analysis, okay? Those 4 open wounds, still got them. I'm still bleeding from 4 places on my body. I still have no medical care. Those boils I was telling you about, I have so many boils on my body I can't count them all. I have so many on my face I can barely see through the boils. I'm down to probably 115 pounds, I figure. My sole possession in life is a rag I have knotted around my waist to hide my nudity. Clearly, I'm rotting away in a communist prison camp, and now, to add insult to injury, they put me next to a positive thinker. I kept tugging. All right, tell me about this prison thinking. He said, don't you see, when a fighter pilot is first blown out of the sky, or a cadet goes through a little wrinkle in the plan of life, what's the first emotion? Oh, God, why me? This is so terrible. What could be worse than this? This event will never have any value. In fact, the best this can ever be is a time of my life I can forget. But hey, it's not my fault. I didn't start this war. The president did. I don't control the enemy. They're torturing prisoners. I didn't build that airplane. I'm clearly the victim here. He said, he said, there's your problem. You see, when you start blaming other people for the challenges of your life, you give them control of your life. That's what the coach was telling. Remember the coach said I had the option to give away the option? Shoemaker says precisely how to do it. You want to lose control of your life? Blame somebody else for your problem. Feel sorry for yourself. Go into a little pity party of your own. He said, Plumber. That was my call sign, Plumber. It could have been Maverick. I don't know. Plumber? Give me a break. We didn't choose our own call signs. Plumber, he said, you've just joined the finest team you'll ever play on, the prisoners of war, the Americans in this prison camp. You will see leadership in this prison camp far and away the best you will ever see. The rest of your life, you'll never see leadership like this. Our leaders can't see us. They can't hear us. They can't talk to us. They can't email us. They can't text us. The only way our leaders can even control is through a silly code. They can't fire us. They can't give us a promotion. They can't give us a Friday afternoon pizza party. And yet, they're the best leaders you will ever see. They've given us a motto. I said, we got a motto? We got a motto. What's the motto? It's 3 words. It's very simple. The motto is this: return with honor. Wow. Every decision you make, says our leadership in the prison camp, has to be seen through the prison. Return with honor. How's that for character above all? How's that for duty, honor, country? But it worked. Here's an interesting statistic. About 5 years ago, a study was done of all the combats of Vietnam. Everybody who was exposed to that war, there's over 1 million people exposed to that war. 30.6% have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Of the prisoners of war, 4% of us have PTSD. It's primarily the guys who were shot down near the end of the war and were only prisoners for a few weeks or a month. How do you figure that? Well, the psychiatrists and psychologists that know more about this than I do say it's because of the leadership that we had that turned this thing around. Shoemaker said, we are not on the defensive. We're not on the defensive. I'm a prisoner of war, for goodness sakes. We are warriors. Our leadership tells us that we will pursue this war till our last dying breath. So pull up your big boy pants, Plumber. We got a war to fight. Whew. I couldn't believe it. I'm in a prison camp. I'm reduced to the very basics of human existence, and they're telling me that I'm on the offensive. But it worked. It worked. You are all leaders, and you will be asked to be better leaders in the future. You will take command. Some of you will be leaders, and you won't have a rank, and yet you're still leaders. In fact, one of the best parachute packers in a prison camp turned out to be a Navy sailor, an enlisted guy. We were pilots. We were all officers. We were college graduates, right? Who shows up? A Navy sailor. How did a sailor get into a prison camp in an air war over North Vietnam? Well, he fell off his ship. He used to tell us, I wasn't captured like you pilots. I was rescued. And indeed he was. 19 years old, Seaman Douglas Hegel from Clark, South Dakota. On the fantail of the cruiser Canberra in the middle of the night, ship burps, he falls off. But could he take a joke? We would tug on our wires and tap on our walls and pass around a little questionnaire just for something to do, okay? Who's the oldest in the prison camp? Who's got the most kids back home? Who's been here the longest? One time we had what we called the high-fast, low-slow contest to try to determine what fighter pilot had jumped out of his jet going highest and fastest and who jumped out going lowest and slowest. Well, high-fast contest was won by some Air Force jock who punched out of his F-105 at 52,000 feet, 1,000 miles an hour. And the low-slow contest was won by the Navy sailor. 12 feet at 15 knots. Oh, but here's the interesting part, and why I take your valuable time to tell you his story. This new hire, insignificant, minimum wage, low-ranking person didn't suffer from this 8-inch box. He didn't have a bad case of this prison thinking. What did the sailor do? He set to work. He got into action. He took a risk. He started collecting all the names of all the prisoners. There were 254 of us in that camp. He put our names into songs. He would sing these songs over and over and over to try to memorize the names. And he did. But he still wasn't finished. He went back through the list. He memorized our Social Security number or identifier, 254 different long numbers. He memorized these things. Still wasn't finished. He memorized our next of kin, wives and fathers in their hometowns all across the country. And finally, I'm not kidding you, Seaman Douglas Hegel memorized the telephone numbers of each of the relatives of each of the prisoners. Unbelievable. That took 2 years. About that time, conditions were getting better. And the enemy decides they're going to send some guys home early before the end of the war as proof of their lenient and humane treatment. First guy they went to was John McCain, my old flight instructor. At the time, his father was Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific. John's dad was in charge of the Vietnam War while John and I were prisoners. And so they went to John and McCain, we're going to send you home before the end of the war. McCain said, in your dreams, I would never embarrass my father by doing that. I would never give up on my buddies, my prisoners of war pals that need American medical aid more than I. You take your idea and shove it. And he got into a lot of trouble by refusing to come home early. So they're still looking for someone. And so our senior man sent the message to the sailor. Son, I want you to volunteer to go home first. The sailor sent back, sir, with all due respect, I'd rather stay here with the team. I want to march home with you guys. I want to be a part of the solution. Our senior man said it's not an option. Here's the direct order. Shove off. The sailor said, aye, aye, sir. Home he came. Write the script on this sailor, okay? What can you imagine a 21-year-old sailor, okay, who's been in prison by accident for 2 years, starved, humiliated, lonely, tortured, but now he hasn't seen a woman in 2 years. He's suddenly free, has a brand new suit of clothes on, 2 years back pay in his pocket, and he's free on the streets of Atlanta. What can you expect of this kid? Oh, did I tell you he was a parachute packer? What do you suppose he did? He started to travel, went west coast to east. He went north to south. He went through each one of the hometowns he memorized. He dialed each one of those telephone numbers he memorized. He spoke to each one of the wives he'd memorized, told her that her husband was alive. Let me ask you this question. You know those folks I'm talking about, those parachute packers? Let me tell you, this school is full of them. They're from your senior leadership right on down, your instructors, people who serve without asking anything in return. Oh, and there are other cadets as well. You know what I'm talking about. That's what this college is about, for sure. Well, I thought about my wife a lot, okay? Remember the lady I had married under the arch of sorrow? I would fast forward my mind an hour a day just to be with her. The day finally came. The war ended. I'd waited and wondered, how would we react? How, a bunch of grown men, when they finally tell us we're going home, would we cry? Would we cheer? Would we hug and kiss everybody around us? Here's how it happened. In came the rat, the camp commander, the guy in charge of all of our torture. We didn't like the rat. He looked like a rat. He was a rat. He opened this, there were several of us in that little cell. He opened the cell door wider than ever been opened. For the first time, and we'd seen him for years, first time we'd ever seen him smile. He was trying to smile. And he didn't have his lackey guard behind him with an AK-47 ready to mow us down. And he tried to speak in broken English. Today's the day. You guys are going home. The war is over. We're trading prisoners. Get on the bus. It's outside the gate. This was the day. These were the words. And nobody moved. Nobody cried. Nobody cheered. Nobody hugged and kissed anybody else. I kept waiting and wanting. Our senior guy, okay, Lieutenant Commander Jim Peary from 8 Mile, Alabama, he stood up. As we had been forced to do all those years, he made a very low, ceremonious bow to the camp commander. Then he squared his jaw and he said, "Sir, we're not going home until all the sick, injured, and enlisted men have left this camp." And he was serious. And the camp commander was incredulous. The rat said, "Peary, you don't understand my English. I'm offering you your freedom." I'll never forget Jim Peary's words. They ring in my ears like this was yesterday. He said, "Sir, freedom is vital to us, but not without our integrity." Camp commander hauled him out of there, beat him up pretty good, put him in the stockade, rice and water. Came back to the rest of us. He was not smiling when he came back. And he had his guard behind him this time. He didn't open the door all the way. He just peeked in and he said, "You junior officers will not be penalized because of the mistake that your senior guy just made if you'll get on the bus." We didn't know what to do. I stood up. And I said, "Sir, it's simple. Just prove to us that the sick, injured, and enlisted men have gone. Give our senior guy back to us, and we'll be ready to go." Well, the camp commander slammed that cell door. He ran up to the head shed. You could hear him all the way up there. He came back about an hour later with a printout. It was a printout of the first plane load of guys. It was also our prayer list, the sick, injured, and enlisted among us. They had gone. Now it was our turn. They put Peary back with us, and he called cadence out that side, that cell, up 2, 3, 4, as we marched out of there, proud Americans with our heads held high, going home on the bus over the dike. From the top of the dike, we could see the runway, the enemy's runway. Only this time, on the end of the runway, a United States Air Force C-141 cargo jet ready to wing us away to freedom. What a sight that was, lump in my throat, but no response. Nobody cried. Nobody cheered. Do you know it wasn't until we climbed aboard that airplane? It wasn't until we rolled down the runway. It wasn't really until we finally lifted off enemy soil. We all started, we broke loose and started hugging and kissing the Air Force nurses. So 90 minutes later, I was putting these feet on free soil. Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines. Ran down the ladder and across the tarmac to the first telephone I could find to call. Remember her? And she was gone. I called my parents back in Kansas. "What's happened to my wife?" I said, "Well, she hung on for 5 years. Then just 3 months ago, your wife filed for divorce. She's engaged to be married to another guy." Never forget that hospital room near Chicago where I spent the first 2 weeks coming home. Curled up in the fetal position, feeling sorry for myself, blaming somebody else, going into the pity party, all right? And then I said, wait a minute, Charlie, you've just survived this experience. Did you learn nothing? Did you learn nothing from the coach? Did you learn nothing from the superintendent? Do you know that it's still your choice? It's not the things around you that's going to determine your success. It's your choice, your decision. So pull up your big boy pants. Let's get on with life. And so I did. The other guy did too. The other prisoners of war coming home, 591 of us, they thought we'd be in baskets. They thought we'd be vegetables. They thought we'd be zombies. They had our families briefed to institutionalize us for the rest of our lives if we needed it. So far, from 591 men, we have produced 17 generals and 7 admirals in the military. We have produced doctors and lawyers and preachers and teachers and bishops and judges. We have 2 United States senators, a bunch of congressmen. No group this size in history has ever done this. We have a vice presidential candidate, a presidential candidate, and they're telling us today we're healthier mentally and physically than if we hadn't been shot down. How's that for proving my principle that getting blown out of the sky can actually be good for you? But the challenges you face in your life, okay, serve as stepping stones of growth. That adversity is a horrible thing to waste. Shoemaker on the end of the wire, 2-star admiral today. My backseater, my co-pilot came back to the States, went back to flying Navy jets off aircraft carriers. Some guys never learn. That's not fair. I continue to fly for the Navy, and I have 2 little airplanes of my own that I fly around the country. Who else did I tell you about? The kid that memorized the names? He's a teacher. Still packing those parachutes. My ex-wife married the guy she was engaged to. I remarried a wonderful lady, and we have 4 kids and 4 grandkids and live a very, very happy life. I ran a marathon a few years ago in Alaska. I know we got some runners in the crowd here. It's called the Midnight Sun Run. I chose that when it's the longest day of the year, okay, in Alaska. I figure I might need 24 hours of daylight to run 26 miles. Trained for 18 weeks. It was tough. Got up there to Alaska. Took 2 of my kids. Joe and Evie went with me to Alaska. Okay, night before the race at the hotel. Kids, this is your dad's craziness. This running this marathon thing, and I don't want to impose on your vacation in Alaska. So tomorrow morning, it's an early go. I don't even know where this race is, but don't worry, I'll find it. You guys sleep in, have a leisurely breakfast, and I'll be back tomorrow afternoon. Oh, it was a hot day for Anchorage. Hadn't planned for that. And the hills around there, man, I'm making excuses because about mile 13, I hit the wall. Man, I'm just really struggling, putting one foot in front of the other, sweating like crazy, thinking the most beautiful sight in the world is going to be that finish sign, but it wasn't. It was under the finish. Here's Joe, Evie, 2 of my kids, cheering on the old man when I finally went to my kids, and I said, you just don't know how much it means to your father to have you here. But how did you find the finish line? Well, Dad, we shared a cab with a couple of guys in the hotel. They knew where it was. I said, how did they know where it was? Well, Dad, they ran the race. They came back to the hotel. They had breakfast. Then we came back and see you finish. What's the message here? I've taken an hour of your very valuable time. I don't take that lightly. What's the transfer? You'll never be prisoners of war. You don't need to know that stuff. But you will have challenges in your life. That's what life is all about, okay? The little fender benders of life, how do you handle that? Well, I don't have any mottos or slogans or anything like that for you. I'll tell you what I can do, though. I can quote some folks, and they told me that if you're going to survive in a prison camp, or you're going to survive in life itself, they said, you're going to have hope. You're going to have courage. You have to have perseverance and faith in God, yourself, and the future. You have to have resilience and strength. You have to have those things you can't measure with a yardstick and you can't learn in a textbook. And if you can take these to heart and pack parachutes with them, I'm convinced you can do anything you set your mind to do. Great being with you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, Captain Plumb, we thank you for your service to our country and your continued commitment in sharing your story. You can clearly see by the reaction here that you are an inspiration to each of us, and you have modeled what it means to be an overcomer and a true patriot, sir. And we are tremendously grateful for your commitment to duty, honor, country, character above all, and the way that you have lived that out through your life. So as a token of our appreciation, if you want to step towards the center, we have our Prep Battalion Commander, Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Shivani Patel, and Cadet Sergeant Major Wyatt Ball, who will present you with this coin.
Ooh, thank you very much. Whoa, that's different. I love it. Character above all. Thank you very much. I will treasure this. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Nice meeting you.
Thank all of you for attending this morning, and follow the directions of your leaders, and you are dismissed. Are you guys